Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where here we enjoy nothing more than high quality plastic miniatures, painting up those miniatures as best we can, and also disgusting, soggy, wet trench pilgrims and demons from hell, all wrapped up in a gruelingly grimdark fantasy setting. And if you also like those things, then first of all, okay then, and second of all, you are in luck, because Trench Crusade has recently announced that they are releasing actual plastic miniatures for their game. Yay. And even though it's only been 1 year since I made my first Trench Crusade video, it would seem that they have taken that year and they've just decided to speed run becoming a worldwide tabletop phenomenon, which is great, but I guess Trench Crusade just gets to skip their awkward teenage years. Jealous. So obviously we are here today because recently I managed to get my hands on some of the goods, and we are going to give this inaugural plastic product the full Rogue Hobbies works. Yay. Fuck stands. So stick around and get comfy, because in this video we are gonna do it all, from an in-depth look and full unboxing of the brand new product, to building, reviewing and comparing our very first miniatures, and of course looking at all of the other cool stuff which is also included with the box itself. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Louise, aren't you gonna be painting a miniature? And the answer is yes, of course I'm going to be painting a miniature. I love painting miniatures. Duh. But in doing so, I will also be facing up against some of my biggest ever miniature painting fears. Because what happens when the intensely grimdark world of Trench Crusade collides with my usual not so grimdark painting style? The answer is that it absolutely shouldn't work. But somehow, and against all odds, I think I actually managed to not only create something which fits in with this polar opposite setting, but is also maybe the best miniature that I have ever painted. Whoosh. Let's go. Before we get started, I want to do my usual short spiel at the beginning of my video, where I firstly say, hi, how are you guys? I hope you and your loved ones are well, and I hope everyone's excited for Christmas and the upcoming cozy months ahead, because I know I am. I love Christmas. It's my favorite time of year, and no one can change my mind. It's the best. And secondly, I've been made aware that occasionally discussions around Trench Crusade can get a little bit heated, and I think it's absolutely fair for me to say, as a person who is quite anxious, that that is not the vibe I want this video to give off, and honestly, internet beef scares me a little. Quite a lot, actually. Remember, if this fictional game/setting makes you in any way uncomfortable, or it's just not quite your jam, then that is totally fine and valid. And it's so okay for you to take a step back from this video, because not everything is gonna be everyone's cup of tea. That's totally fine, and you will receive no judgment from me. And also because I like to be very clear about everything you see on screen, so you can all be informed consumers. Whilst I wasn't given this box early or anything like that, I was given it for free by the lovely people at Trench Crusade when I visited their stall at Spiel Essen. So yes, the box was for free, no one paid me to make this video, and as usual, all my opinions are still my own. Thank you. So with all that being said, let's finally crack into this very exciting new release and see just how well Trench Crusade has done with their initial breakthrough into the plastic miniature market. I believe outside of the artillery witch busts and items like that, this is the first time that we've ever seen a physical branded release come out of Trench Crusade, and I have to say that I think it looks super professional. The artwork is awesome, the box design is very clean and classy and will work for any warband, and the miniature painting and photography too is very, very good. But let's stop judging this book by its cover and take a little peep at what you actually get inside of the box. This first box contains 8 plastic miniatures for a Prussian Stosstruppen warband, and is on its own a complete starter force for Trench Crusade, as unlike something like a classic game of 40k, Trench Crusade uses smaller warbands and fewer miniatures, and according to the Trench Crusade website, this whole box currently retails for around £32. When you open up the box, you will find 2 plastic sprues, one slightly bigger than the other, in a familiar grey grey colour, but before we get into the minis, I have to admit that my initial reaction upon opening this box was, oh no, did something go wrong when they were packing my box? Because my first question was, where is the construction booklet? Well, it turns out that with this box, you get not only the construction booklet, but also the lore, full rules, awesome artwork, and various starter lists for free in this 72-page PDF, which you can access by scanning the QR code on the back of the box here. And also, you don't even need to buy the box to access all of this cool stuff. You can just click the link in the item description here to access that PDF as well, which, to try and put this as briefly as possible, I think is an incredibly based move for Trench Crusade to do. Having rules and lists online for free kind of allows us as consumers to try on armies and stay informed about what we're buying before we decide to buy them. Point is, I think that this is awesome, and this kind of practice should definitely be commonplace, especially for miniature companies where people pay money for the armies that they want to play. Apart from all of the free rules and lore and other stuff, another cool feature of this online PDF is not only that you can zoom into the picture of the paint job indefinitely, which is pretty damn handy for people like me, but mostly that right at the end of the document, you will find a page with complete credits to the team involved with making the box. And no, I don't mean like, it was a pleasure to be part of the team that worked on this Trench Crusade product. Maybe. I mean like full, actual human names, which again is very hell yeah of Trench Crusade, and again, in my opinion, should be a low bar industry standard for companies like this. So with all that awesome extra stuff out the way, let's get right into the reason I'm so excited for this release, which is the miniatures themselves. A month or two ago, I did a video kind of similar to this one when Bandai released their new Warhammer scale plastic miniatures for Gundam Assemble, and I had a lot to say about them because they were quite different to what I'm used to, which is primarily Games Workshop plastic. But honestly, I think that this section is actually going to be quite brief because from my experience, the quality of this plastic kit is pretty comparable to the quality of a Games Workshop plastic kit, and for their very first release, I personally think that is very impressive. Whilst this is technically Trench Crusade's first plastic release, the miniatures themselves are being produced by Archon Studios, who are already well renowned for high quality plastic kits like the ones included in their Dungeons and Lasers range. As you can see here, the color and thickness of the plastic is very similar to that of a Warhammer sprue, but what you can't see is that the texture or hardness, I guess, is also very similar too. And this is all well and good, but the real question that we should all be asking is, what are the details like on the plastic miniatures themselves? And fortunately, the answer once again is very, very good. Here are some extreme close-ups that I took of the sprue so you can see exactly what you're getting in this kit and just how well these details hold up, even at this level of magnification. There are some very impressive tiny little features going on here, which all seem to have translated super well to this minuscule scale. Since I'm not necessarily planning on running a full Prussian warband in the future, I decided to build a select few miniatures from this kit to kind of test it out as well as I could, and I ended up building a Strasstruppen, the yeoman with a war glockenspiel, because obviously he's low-key the best and an absolute mad lad, and then what I consider to be the two standout characters in the box, the very Trench Crusade looking Feldkaplan and the beautifully sculpted poster girl Hauptmann Friederike von Goltz. The construction guide was extremely easy to use, the miniatures went together great with no weird gaps or anything, the sprues even have little arrows which point to the parts you're looking for, which is very handy, and I'd say there's probably the exact same amount of mold line cleanup that you're used to on something like a Warhammer miniature. Also, a quick bonus point is that every single one of the miniatures in the box have weapon swap options or pose variants for either melee or shooty combat. And because of this, I decided to be a little bit awkward with my assembly and push the kit a bit by mixing up my Hauptmann with a combination which wasn't really mentioned in the construction guide. I chose to build her with the helmet off, the sword on, and a cool-ass demonic base instead of the recommended sandbags. And still, it all went very, very well, and nothing looked weird or out of place on the miniature, and in fact, I love this miniature, and it's definitely by far my favorite mini in the entire kit. And because I really want to hammer home just how similar the quality of this plastic is to Games Workshop's, here is a little comparison of a Stosstupen next to the closest Games Workshop equivalent I could find, which is a new plastic deathcore guy. Nice. But please let me know what you think about this new release in general in the comments section below. Have you picked up the box yourself? And if you have, what do you think of it? And what do you think of the minis? And are you excited for more plastic releases in the future? Or will you continue to kit bash and 3D print your way through your own Trench Crusade armies? Because I think that whilst I will also be taking advantage of Trench Crusade's open license by picking and choosing some third-party STLs here and there from various designers, because having options is fun, I think I will also keenly be awaiting the release of more plastic kits like this one in the future, because honestly, for a first release, I'm already very impressed. Anyways, because I am me and my life goal is to be the very best like no one ever was at miniature painting, I am going to be selecting just one of these miniatures to paint up using every single morsel of my creative and artistic ability. And whilst I was obviously tempted by the spooky Angel Man and the War Glockenspieler, I thought the miniature which I would not only enjoy the most but would also be the biggest challenge for me to paint would of course be the fully armored Hauptmann Frederica. And as you guys probably know by now, there is nothing I love more in the world than a good painting challenge, but oh boy, this was a big one. Since I chose to assemble Miss von Goltz with a big sword and this alarmingly beautiful long braid of hair which covers her back, I decided to split the miniature into 3 different sub-assemblies. And obviously I decided to start with one of my favorite things ever to paint, which is the face. Due to the fact that I absolutely love the official artwork for this miniature, I wanted to paint her to have the same sort of expression as she has there, with this kind of sneering side-eye glance and piercing eye sort of vibe. I also spent ages trying to emphasize this massive gash on her face, which is a detail that I absolutely adore. According to Tumas Periran, these facial scars were marks of honor amongst particularly grueling and high-ranking fencing clubs, so I wanted to make sure it was very obvious that she was wearing hers with a lot of pride. I also decided to add a little bit more flavor to her face by giving her a kind of runny mascara sort of effect too, because she is in actual Trench Crusade after all, and we can't be having her looking too put together. Once I was satisfied with her resting bitch face, I couldn't quite work out what color I wanted her hair to be. In the artwork, she looks young but has this kind of grey toned hair, and the same is true of the official paint job as well. And although I liked how striking and high contrast she looked with black hair, since her hair is so long and pretty and it even has these little girly bows on it too, I thought I might as well go full Rapunzel and give her bright blonde hair. And I think this color ended up suiting her super well, but she looks more than a little bit like a Trench Crusade Barbie Margot Robbie now, which I'm not mad about at all. She can be like the grimdark Barbenheimer love child we never asked for or knew that we wanted. But with one sub-assembly down, it was time to move on to the other, which was this massive, beautiful sword, which when attached to the front of the miniature will definitely be a huge focal point on the piece, so I really wanted to make it shine. The lore has a little excerpt which says that Frederica's tank splitter sword is very important to her, and she's renowned for polishing it to the nines whilst reciting holy prayers. So I knew that I wanted the metallics on this sword to reflect that and read as shinier and brighter than any of the metallics that I would do later on her body, as if the sword is glowing with the grace of God himself. And I think that somehow I managed to kind of wing it and combine everything I knew about painting Warhammer power swords with some really nice color choices, and in the end, the effect ended up looking very, very nice, I think. But now it was time to move on to the main body of the miniature, which, as you may have noticed, is around 80% this suit of armor. And as you guys may know, the very concept of painting any kind of metallics fills me with dread. And initially I thought I'd make things a little easier for myself and maybe do some grimy Grimdark black armor or something like that. But I don't know, something in me was saying that I should throw caution and the general theme of the setting to the wind and make this Grimdark miniature a little bit more noble bright. I started by base coating the armor in a neutral, slightly blue-toned grey, and then in the same way I did when I painted my almost cel-shaded Gundam, I started plotting in some really basic purpley shadows and yellowy highlights. And fortunately for me, there are a lot of references for shiny metallic knight armor online, so obviously that helped me out loads with all my initial light and shadow placements. And after a very long time of back and forthing between colors and shadows and lights and glazes to try and get it looking kind of how I thought it should, I don't know, I actually don't think it looks too shabby. Is it perfect? No! Do I like it? Maybe I do. Is it the best non-metallic metals I've ever done because I pushed myself really hard to improve? Probably, actually, yes, and I think that's awesome. So yay me, and yay me pushing myself to actually improve and then seeing the results of doing so. Let's go. It's a good feeling. I'm proud of me. After the armor was all polished off, pun intended, the other small details on the miniature, like the leather straps, belt buckles, and the little side bags, came together super quickly. But as I love to do, I managed to find another opportunity to put in a little Easter egg on Frederica's little sash at the front here. Whilst I'm not super sure what the historic purpose of the sash is, and maybe if you're a history buff or an armor nerd, then you can let me know in the comments section, but since Frederica in the lore is cited as being trained and tutored by a variety of grizzled sword-fighting veterans, I decided to pay a small homage to my own grizzled tutoring experience and make the sash resemble the tartan of my old high school in Scotland. Also, at this scale, the tartan sort of reads as that of the famous Scottish infantry battalion, the Black Watch. And yeah, I think that adding little Easter eggs and hints towards my Scottish heritage is something that I will definitely be trying to do on a lot of my Trench Crusade miniatures in the future, because history is fun, and also Scotland forever. After I put in that colourful little splash, I decided that it was finally time to throw any resemblance of Grimdark out of the window and really commit to making this Hotman Knight look truly noble and bright by adding in some very regal blues and reds to the rest of the armour panels and the shoulder pad too. And someone pointed out that I was just using Gundam colours once again, and honestly, I'm kind of mad about it, but they're not wrong, so I suppose I can't be mad about it. I just didn't turn up today to reflect on myself, so take a day off, people with observation skills. Just let me be. Thank you. One thing I'm not mad about though is these little non-metallic gold elements that I managed to pull off on these little skulls here. Maybe I just find gold easier to do than silver because it's an actual colour, but yes, I think that they slap and look awesome, so yay me once again for attempting to conquer non-metallics. Now it was time to move on to one of the parts of the miniature that I was really excited to paint, which is her little side coat here, which for all you history buffs and reference lovers, I believe is called a pelisse. But yeah, this was another part of the miniature where I wanted to add another striking flash of colour to really draw the eye. And my plan was to try and freehand in some very traditional and royal looking mustard yellow and red stripes onto her tiny jacket. And honestly, it felt like a little bit of a risk because painting stripes on fabric is very hard, and I was worried it would read as too busy and potentially ruin the whole paint job and I'd have to repaint it, and I would be very sad. But after a little bit of back and forth to get those stripes looking just right, and then some stippling on the highlights to make the fabric read a little bit more woolly, I think the coat turned out great. It adds a bunch of warmth to the miniature and once again has just made the paint job feel a lot more me, while still keeping it looking sort of semi-serious and historical coded. But most of all, it's fashion, baby. But with the main miniature's paint job all done, it was finally time to move on to the last little detail on the mini itself, which is that little bit of scenery detail right under her foot. Unless you're painting the big winged angel guy, this kit does lean more towards a more historical look than some of the wilder designs that we're used to seeing from the Trench Crusade range. And because of this, I knew I wanted to make the demon skull on her base be a key feature, so I decided I'd try and make the skull look like it was radiating a deep glowing red light, as if hell itself were seeping out of it. I used some thinned down saturated red paint to kind of fill in all of the recesses around the base for that initial glow effect, and then I applied some smaller and more concentrated oranges and bright yellows to complete this very simple object source lighting or OSL effect. And this ended up looking really cool, I think. It added a little focal interest to the base while still keeping the overall look of the base dark and mysterious so that it framed the much bigger miniature effectively too. But even with the whole miniature finally painted up to the nines, for me, the battle was not yet won. Because once again, it was time for me to suffer through doing the base. The TLDR here is that generally I don't love basing. I find it difficult, I overthink it, and often it makes me feel like I'm just ruining a miniature at the last minute whenever I do it. But for this particular trench lady, I actually had a plan. So one of the main issues I'm having with basing recently, and maybe you guys have this problem too if you're trying to paint to a higher standard, is that currently the level I'm trying to paint towards is so high that whenever I finish a miniature, I feel like it needs to go in a plinth in order to do the miniature justice. Which means that every miniature that I paint recently can basically never be used in a game ever because they're all stuck up on their lofty little plinth. And honestly, I think that's a little bit of a shame, especially when it comes to Trench Crusade, because I actually am interested in having a couple of games of it in the future. I know. Rare. So I decided, as usual when it came to basing, that I would try and execute a pretty extra plan in order to give myself the best of both worlds. I put the miniature itself on a simple 32mm gaming base and kind of blended the scenic base into the gaming base by simply using some sterling mud and a similar glow in the middle dark on the outside vignette effect. Then I tasked Rascal Town Sculptor and all-round smart guy Tom to create a plinth with a little bit of a twist, because I requested this plinth to have a hole that would fit a magnet inside of it right in the middle. This meant that by putting a magnet both inside the plinth and on the bottom of the gaming base, I could now switch between the miniature being on a fancy display plinth and also it becoming playable in a game. And to my surprise, the whole thing worked, and I feel a little bit like an evil genius, but I'm sure that other people have come up with this very simple concept before me, right? And if not, then let me know, and I could potentially put the STL for this plinth over on my Patreon so you can all have it. But until then, this is my plinth, OC. Do not steal. But with her based up, it's finally time for me to reveal what I think might be, after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, one of the best miniatures I have ever painted. And here she is, my first ever Trench Crusade miniature is finally painted up, and Hauptmann Frederica von Goltz is ready to defy the forces of hell with a very stylish new paint job. I'm really glad that for this first Trench Crusade miniature, I didn't pressurize myself to make it grimdark like I initially thought I would do, because this mini was an absolute delight to paint up in my own personal style. And honestly, even though she is a slightly noble bright twist on the usual style that you see from the Trench Crusade community, I think that as a highborn noble, she actually wouldn't look that untoward amongst the filthy ranks of her underlings. And actually, a noble bright splash of colour like what I've done here could be a fun way to introduce a little holy hope to your favourite heroes in wargaming's bleakest setting. And yes, I am super happy with how this miniature came out, and I'm glad that I pushed myself and I did all that suffering along the way, because I really do think that she may be one of the best miniatures I have ever painted. So yeah, all in all, the kit was awesome, the miniature was really fun to paint, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more plastic releases from Trench Crusade in the future, especially ones with a little more holy or demonic pizzazz, like maybe Trench Pilgrims or the Iron Sultanate, and especially start collecting artillery witches. I really hope they do that. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, thank you guys for being rogues. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Bye-bye.